What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and some more bolt action coverage for you guys as we continue our series looking at the core scenarios here from the main rulebook for the game. So we move right along here with key positions, which is going to be a little bit different than the first two, which are essentially more about destroying your opponent. So this one actually is more of an objective mission, right? So the battlefield includes a series of positions that are strategically vital for the continuation of the campaign and must be seized at all costs. So setup here is where we get into the objectives at the outset. So either player rolls d3 plus 2, so basically a minimum of 3 objectives here. This is the number of objectives used in the game. Then both players roll a die. The highest scoring player places one anywhere on the table. Then the opponent places an objective and does the same. And then basically all objectives must be more than 12 from each other. These objectives could be tactically important positions like buildings, etc., and kind of adds to the game if you can make it something like that, right? As opposed to just using like a poker chip or something just to represent some random spot on the table. It's nice when it can be tied into the scenery as well. Or things like ammo dumps and so on and so forth. Objectives can be simple markers or tokens, as they say, but again, it's nice when you can marry that with the scenery in the game. It really just adds to the game, right? The important thing is that both players clearly identify the objectives before the battle begins. Once the objectives have been placed, both players roll a die. The highest scoring player picks a long table side and declares which of his units, again, if any, will be in reserve. And again, this can be up to half, rounding down. That's pretty consistent so far, right? Across these scenarios, the other player then does the same. No units are set up on the table. Any units not left in reserve are the first wave, and basically they're going to be rolling on here. So the objective, as you might guess, is capture as many objectives as possible. The battle begins, so during turn 1, both players bring their first wave onto the table. These units can enter the table from any point on the edge and must either come on with run or advance orders. Note that no order test is required to move the units onto the table as part of that. And as normal, 6 turns, roll a d6. On a 4-up, you go to 7 turns. Victory here, so at the end of the game, if you hold more objectives than the opponent, you win, otherwise it's a draw. To hold an objective, you must be a model from one of your infantry or artillery units or a transport including one such unit within 3 of the objective at the end of the game, and there must be no enemy within 3 as well. And that's pretty simple, right? So a couple key takeaways there. So you just have to have more than the opponent, right? So really you could have 1 objective and they could have 0, right? It does not mean you have to have the majority of them, as in, for example, 3 out of 5, which would be 5 being the maximum that we could possibly have in this. But that being said, if you do control 3 at the end of the game, then you're definitely going to win, right? So a couple things that jump out here that we could use to, again, modify the game. Now we've talked about, environmental things like nighttime, weather, and so on and so forth, and that certainly can add some variety, but we could also mess with the number of objectives, right? We could just go with a simple D3, especially if you only roll 1. Well, that 1 objective is going to be very important, right? Because it's basically you either hold it or you don't at the end of the game to win. So, you can do things like that. D3, D3 plus 1, D3 plus 3, right? Minimum of 4, maximum of 6. Just various things there. Heck, we could just make it a D6, right? So lots and lots of interesting possibilities there with varying that. Now, it is surprising here that it did say basically they just have to be 12 inches away from each other, but typically it's just good practice to also have them be at least a certain distance from the table edge, right? Because that just avoids any kind of weird shenanigans that someone might try to pull, and just keeps things somewhat balanced in that regard. So it was a little bit surprising that that's not in here, but again, not written, but something that I think would just be good practice. So typically like at least 6 from a table edge seems like a fair move. And interestingly here though, you could certainly be putting that into your half of the table, right? So again, whoever's going first is going to be able to place more, unless you end up with an even number of objectives somehow, just depending on what you're modifying. But again, keep in mind what your army is capable of that you're fielding, plan your objectives accordingly. Obviously the scenario will matter as well, and then just figure out a game plan around that. So you got to control more to win. Which ones can you for sure hold, and then what else do you need to really take over? You don't necessarily have to control all of them, right? Just more of them. So scoring is pretty simple again. So got to keep infantry or artillery or transports that have that within 3. So you want to at least build up a cushion there and keep enemy a solid distance away from that. Now, we could also modify the scenario here. Again, basically the first wave is walking on. What if we started with forces, half your forces already present, and then the second wave actually rolls on first turn? Or, you're already starting half on the board, but then the other half are reserves as it's described here. So again, there's just little variations in the timing of things that we could do as well. Or, if you really want to make it sort of a nail biter, make it so that every unit, will start off the board, maybe ignore reserves, but every unit has to roll to get on or something like that, right? So again, there's lots of little things we could play around with to add fun to the scenario. But as always, guys, let us know in the comments what you think about key positions. So this is our first objective scenario that we've looked at, and how you play it, any modifications that you've made. As always, also like and subscribe, guys, helps keep the channel going. And if you want to support the channel a little bit more, check out the link in the description there. Anything you pick up from Warlord via that link will help support us. Thanks so much for watching as always, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.